My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my ranking of Ridley Scott's movies from worst to best. And this video will have spoilers for his movies, including Gladiator 2, so there's your warning. But I should say up front that this list does not include every one of his movies. It doesn't include The Duelist, Someone to Watch Over Me, Black Rain, 1492 Conquest of Paradise, White Squall, G.I. Jane, A Good Year, American Gangster, and Body of Lies. I started this marathon and I hated so many of these movies that I just couldn't complete it. But let's begin by talking about his worst movie, and it's Robin Hood. Robin Hood is such an iconic story, and he's such an iconic character, but this movie just wastes every ounce of potential, and it just felt like the most typical, bland, forgettable Ridley Scott movie possible. There is nothing that this movie does effectively, and I think it's unwatchable garbage. His second worst movie is going to be a hot take, but I really hate Black Hawk Down. Now, I should say that war movies are one of my least favorite movie genres, just because so many of them just look and feel the exact same, and that's definitely the case with this movie. It just doesn't stand out in any way, and I was never engaged with anything going on. I found it to be a very overlong, boring movie, and I thought the action was just bland. So that's why it's his second worst movie. His third worst movie is going to be another hot take, because I do know this movie has its passionate fans, but Kingdom of Heaven just did nothing for me. I just couldn't engage with the story. I couldn't connect with anything going on, and I watched the director's cut, so it's 3 hours long, and I just found it to be a miserable watch. His fourth worst movie is one I didn't even bother reviewing, and it's The Counselor. Now, I see a lot of defense for this movie, and I just don't get it. I never found it entertaining, engaging, effective. It's just a big ol' nothing movie that I forgot 2 minutes after I turned it off. His fifth worst movie is House of Gucci. Now, I didn't like the story. I found this movie to be way too long. But I actually really liked Jared Leto's performance in this movie. It is very campy and very funny, and he definitely stood out. Everything else in this movie, though, eh. His sixth worst movie is Napoleon. Now, Joaquin Phoenix does do a good job, and the movie does have a couple of funny moments, and there was some interesting stuff with the main relationship in this movie, but it just gets lost in this very long, bloated mess. I thought the action was underwhelming, and I just didn't find this movie to be particularly effective or interesting as a whole. Has its moments, but it falls short. And then we get to his seventh worst movie, and it's the brand new Gladiator 2. Now, I will say that this movie does have good sets. The costumes are good. And there was some cool, brutal action, but I kind of wanted more. Like, for a movie called Gladiator 2 about a gladiator, I wanted more action. Like that scene with the flooded Colosseum should have been amazing, and it just did nothing for me. I didn't really care for any of the performances here. Paul Mescal is a giant step down from Russell Crowe. Denzel Washington is charismatic, but I don't think he does the villainous aspects of this character particularly well. Pedro Pascal and Connie Nielsen and the two villains are fine, but they don't have enough to work with. And my big issue with this movie is that there's good plot points here, but it's executed in just a lackluster manner. Like Paul Mescal losing his wife early on had zero emotional weight to it. And then there was some interesting dynamics where he wants revenge against Pedro Pascal, but Pedro Pascal actually wants to protect him. And that's a great idea. That could have made for some compelling character work. And then the movie just does nothing with it. Like, Paul Mescal wants to kill Pedro Pascal until he doesn't, like that. And then Pedro Pascal dies, and it lacked any bit of weight, and from that point on, the movie just goes off the rails. When Connie Nielsen died, I felt nothing, and I definitely should have. And the whole plot, it had potential. I just thought the execution sucked, and that final fight between Paul Mescal and Denzel Washington is just so underwhelming. So honestly, I'm going to forget about this movie in a week, so that's why it's one of his worst. His 8th worst movie is All the Money in the World. And this movie is overlong. I don't think it's good, but there are some good ideas present. Like, how much money is one life worth? And you just explore this terrible, greedy piece of shit that won't pay for his grandson's ransom and eventually uses it to get what he wants. Like, it has interesting ideas, but the movie as a whole just isn't one I'd ever go back to. The 9th worst movie by Ridley Scott is Thelma and Louise. Now, Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis do give good performances. Brad Pitt does a perfectly fine job, but the movie as a whole just doesn't really do anything for me. It's not a movie that stays with me. It's not a movie I think about. It's not a movie I'd rewatch. It's just a big or nothing movie. The 10th worst Ridley Scott movie is going to be a very hot take, but it's the original Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner 2049 does everything this movie is trying to do, but does it infinitely better. Now, this movie does look great. There are some good ideas, and the last act is actually pretty good, but I just find this movie to be lacking for so much of its runtime, and I find it to be boring. And if I'm ever in the mood for this kind of movie, I will pick its sequel 100% of the time. And then we get to his 10th best movie, which is Exodus, Gods and Kings. Now, this movie is definitely way too long, but the technical aspects are really impressive, and the story of Moses is just so good that this movie does have something to offer. But that said, if I'm ever in the mood to watch a movie about Moses, then I will always pick The Prince of Egypt. So, it's a decent attempt, but it's nothing special. And now we get to the ninth best movie, which is Matchstick Men. Now this movie isn't great, it's predictable, but I do like the story it's trying to tell. It's about a bad man living a bad life who has bad mental health problems, and it's about how the life he has created for himself is actively affecting his health. And it does a good enough job of exploring that. Nicolas Cage does a very good job. Sam Rockwell is good. Alison Lohman does a good job. It's nothing great, but it's entertaining enough. His eighth best movie is Legend, which I do kind of find boring, but this movie is just so beautiful to look at. The costumes, the production design, the cinematography, the colors, the lighting, it's all just perfection. I also really like the music and how it adds to the vibes of this movie. And there is one really cool scene where a character gets corrupted by an evil dress. And yeah, the performances, the story, but technically this movie is just a marvel. His seventh best movie is Hannibal. And I feel like this movie is underrated because people just compare it to The Silence of the Lambs, but I think this movie is good. It's engaging, the performances are great, but it's the last act that really elevates this movie. Like, it is so fucked up. It really is. When Hannibal is feeding that guy his own brains, it is one of the most horrific scenes I have ever seen, and it has stayed with me significantly. I still got a few issues with this movie, but I think it's much better than its reputation would lead you to believe. But now we get to the great movies, beginning with The Last Duel. And this movie is just so underappreciated. It is too long. It can be a bit too slow, but the story being told is just incredible. This movie shows three different perspectives of the same events, and each perspective gives this story depth. It tells us how the characters view themselves and how they view other people, and the movie constantly evolves, and our viewpoint on everything is constantly changing, and I just thought it was a brilliant movie that leads up to this final battle so incredibly well, and it just fully delivers. The Last Duel is such an exciting action scene, and I thought Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Jodie Comer, Adam Driver all gave great performances. And his fifth best movie is Gladiator. Now, I don't love this movie as much as some people because I find the first 20 minutes really slow. The death of Maximus's wife and kid just didn't have any real weight to me, but from that point on, the movie fully kicks into gear and it really works. Russell Crowe carries this movie so incredibly well, and he adds plenty of weight to everything going on. Joaquin Phoenix is just so despicable, and you love to hate his character. Connie Nelson is great. Oliver Platt, Dejong Hansu, the entire cast delivers. The movie looks great. The movie has some great action scenes, but there is plenty of substance to everything going on. This movie is about this man becoming a symbol, and it's about a rebellion, and it's about someone's legacy and character, and it explores all these ideas so perfectly, and despite its slow start, it ends up being a really terrific movie. His fourth best movie is going to be a hot take, but I love Alien Covenant. First of all, the movie looks amazing. Secondly, the movie is messed up. Like, there is some really horrific stuff going on here. And on top of just being a creature feature, the movie also has plenty of depth. Like, this is a movie about creation, and it explores religion, it explores mankind in such interesting ways, and I just feel like this movie isn't just tense and thrilling, but it's also a really smart movie with a great performance by Michael Fassbender. He just really knocks it out of the park here, and the ending scene to this movie is so horrific, and I would love to see a follow-up. So, yes, I really love this movie. But his third best movie is Alien. Now, this is the original Alien movie. This is the one that set up this universe, introduced us to this mythology, and for that I give this movie all the credit in the world. The eggs, the face huggers, the xenomorphs, it all came from this movie. And I think the movie has plenty of atmosphere. It can be really tense. It's thrilling. The movie looks incredible. Like, the practical effects and the production design are just top notch. And I love how Ripley is a character who starts off in the background, but as she makes smart decisions, she eventually becomes the main character. And Sigourney Weaver just does a really great job here. The movie does feel like 10 minutes too long. It can drag every now and again, but there is so much to love, so that's why it's his third best movie. His second best movie, though, is The Martian. And this is just a very entertaining and a very easy to like movie. It is so long, but it never drags. I was fully engaged with the story the entire time, and it's inspiring to see so many people come together to achieve a common goal, and I found it to be a powerful experience. I find this movie to be emotionally moving. It can also be very tense, it can also be really funny, and just everybody does a really great job. Matt Damon gives maybe the performance of his career, and he carries this movie perfectly. But Jeff Daniels and Donald Glover and the rest of the cast really stands out as well. And by the end, you just feel good after watching this movie. Really fantastic. I love it. That's why it's number 2. But my favorite Ridley Scott movie is Prometheus. First of all, this movie looks incredible. The CGI, the practical effects, the production design, the cinematography, the costumes, just the technical aspects are perfection. And I also love how ambitious this movie is and how it can be really tense and thrilling and brutal and gross, but the movie is very thought-provoking. It has plenty of substance to it about all search for purpose and all creation. There's one scene between, what's his name? Logan and David. Well, David asks him, "Why did you create me?" And he's just like, "I don't know, because we could." And David's just like, "Could you imagine how disappointed it would be to get that same response from your creator?" And that scene is just one of my favorite scenes in cinema history. It is so smart, and it just explores this movie's themes so effectively, and it's also willing to go in these weird, bold directions. And I find this movie to be so entertaining, and it's not just my favorite Ridley Scott movie, but it's actually my favorite alien movie as well. I love it so very much, so that's why it's number one. So Ridley Scott's filmography is interesting because there's a few exceptions, but I either really hate his movies or I really love his movies. Just weird. I don't know if he's got another great movie in him, but I hope one day I'm proven to be wrong. But anyways, what's your ranking of his filmography? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos soon. And Gavin out.